Number 1. On the road. This is a really strange story that I don't like telling very often. When I would drive to my grandma's house, I had to drive on a lonely gravel country road that almost no one ever drove on. It was also somewhat windy and I never felt good driving on it. This happened when I went to visit my grandma when I was 19 years old. I was driving through the area, back from college for Thanksgiving, and wanted to stop and make a visit. Now, I was nervous driving down the road really, as I had done it a few times before. But this was different. First, it was nighttime, so it was very dark. That made it kinda scary. The trees were really close to the road and looked like they were reaching out. When I was a kid, I knew that I was really terrified of those trees. That is when I noticed something. Something shined off the side of the road ahead of me. When I got closer, I noticed that there was a car that had gone off the side of the road. It went pretty far, which surprised me, but it was definitely crashed into a tree. Of course, I was immediately concerned. As I mentioned, not a lot of people drove down that road, so it was likely that I was the first person to find the car. I parked my car and got a flashlight out of my trunk. If someone was trapped in the car, I wanted to do whatever I could to help them out. I found it weird that the car had gotten so far into the woods though, as the forest was pretty dense, so it must have missed a few trees. When I got up to the car, I noticed a few things right away. First of all, its lights were out and it was off. However, I touched the hood of the car and it felt warm. So it hadn't been a very long time before it had crashed. But the interesting thing was that no one was in the car. I'd seen that when I first came up to the car and noticed that the driver's door was open. There was also some blood in the car. Looking down on the ground around me, I noticed that there was some blood on it too, although it looked like it was leading the opposite way of the road. My immediate thought was that the driver must have crawled out of the car and tried to find some help. But why wouldn't he be headed towards the road? He could have suffered a head injury that messed up his thinking. And in that case, I should try to find him even harder to help him out. I started looking around the woods with the flashlight, looking to see where the driver might have gone to. At first it seemed rather futile because it was so dark outside and the woods were so thick, but I eventually noticed that there was someone who was a bit far away of me. He looked as if he were just trying to get deeper and deeper into the forest. I called out to the guy a few times. The first time, I could tell he turned and looked at me, but I wasn't really able to make out any definitive features. He stood there for a few moments, like he was contemplating me, before finally turning back around and going the way he had been going. I wasn't sure what to do. However, it did seem pretty clear that the guy didn't want my help. I considered it for a few moments and decided that the better idea was likely to just go up to my grandma's house and call 911 so he could get the help that he for some reason didn't want from me. So that is exactly what I did. The police and the ambulance came, and of course, they wanted to talk to me too. They wanted any details that I could give them of the man that I had seen. This was because the car was stolen. The real owner of the car had been tied up and was in the trunk of the car. I couldn't give them many details, but they didn't need it anyway. He must have passed out from his injuries and the police caught him. The driver of the car was the boyfriend of the girl who owned it, and she was in the trunk and had just broke up with him. They could only theorize what he was going to do to her. Let's just say Thanksgiving dinner that year was kind of weird for me, but I was thankful I didn't go after that guy. Number 2. Black Friday. We've all seen those videos from the worst Black Friday store openings where people are getting crushed and trampled. These days, online shopping and early sales have definitely lessened the insanity, but there are still plenty of people who try to keep the tradition alive. Normally, I would never go out in this craziness, but a few years ago I did think that maybe if I went out after the sun came up, everything would be calmed down by then. I even thought that it might be safe to bring my daughter, but I was wrong. Susie, not her real name, obviously, was 4 at the time. Her older brother and sister were fine to stay home with her older cousin, but I just didn't feel comfortable leaving her, so I decided to bring her with me. I planned out my route ahead of time and knew exactly what items I was getting at each store. I was sure I had it all figured out. By our third stop, a Walmart, Susie was getting hungry. I promised her that we'd go out to lunch after this stop at her favorite place, and held her hand tight as we made our way into the store. It was still so much busier than I had expected. We had had to circle the parking lot 3 times before I found a spot. The lines at the registers were stretching way back into the store. For a moment I considered skipping the stop, but the discounts were too good to pass up. I made my way through the store, grabbing each of the items on my list. When we made it to the electronics section, they didn't have any more of the earbuds my son had asked me for, so I spotted an employee. They had just finished helping someone a few yards away. I waved my hands and called, "Excuse me," but they didn't hear me over the crowd. I took a small step away from the cart and called again, then one more step, when someone pushed past me, bumping into me hard. I stumbled, and it was like I was swept over by the crowd. As I pinballed off various people, I regained my balance, apologizing here and there, and finally got the employee's attention. They came over and asked how they could help. I told them what I was looking for, and returned towards the case that had the earbuds in it, when my stomach turned over. Susie wasn't in the cart. I spun in the aisle, looking for her. I pushed people out of my way as I searched. Surely, she hadn't gotten out of the cart on her own. She was barely even awake when I stepped away. But why did I even step away? Why did I ever let go of that cart? I pushed my way through the crowd and out into the main aisle, but I didn't see her anywhere. It was then that the employee caught up and seemed to have realized what was going on. He asked me for a description and then vanished back into the crowd. I continued fighting through the crowd. I didn't know if she'd been taken, gotten out of the cart on her own, somehow, and was looking for me, or what. She could have gotten trampled by this insane crowd. Why was it even so crowded after the biggest of all the sales were over? Over the roar of the crowd, I heard the intercom come on, and the announcement of a code Atom with Susie's description. Suddenly the mood of the store shifted as employees began excusing themselves from helping customers and were searching the crowd. Some customers who seemed familiar with the code appeared to be helping. Others were screaming about needing help right now. I could hear the employee that had been helping me calling for me, but I was afraid they'd stop me and try to comfort me, and all I wanted to do was find my daughter. I don't even know how far I'd run from where I left my cart when I heard Susie's little voice cry out for me. I spun in the direction her voice came from and saw her little face looking back over the shoulder of some stranger's ratty coat. I called to her and started pushing my way in that direction as others turned to look. I felt a surge of hope as everyone seemed to become aware of this person trying to snatch my daughter, and I was sure we'd stop them. But the person noticed too, and as they spun around, I saw the knife in his hand. I and most of the people standing close to this nutcase froze and stared as he spun my daughter around to face me and held this large hunting knife to her tiny throat. She began crying, and he shook her roughly and told her to shut up. The terror and anger were flooding over me, but with no idea what to do, I was quickly turning into panic. I don't even know what he wanted. I didn't hear anything he said as he waved the knife wildly and shook my daughter like a doll. Then before anyone knew what happened, both the knife and Susie dropped to the floor as the kidnapper crumpled to the ground, bleeding from his head. I ran to Susie and grabbed her up, making sure she wasn't hurt. Nothing was broken, but she was bruised and crying and had a small cut on her throat. I held her to me and assured her that she was okay. My eyes scanned over the kidnapper, lying in a crumpled pile on the ground with a bleeding scalp, then up to the large biker-looking man with a long beard and tattoos who was holding a large cast-iron skillet that he'd obviously just landed on the back of the kidnapper's head. I was never so grateful to anyone as I was to this man. Sure, there were cops to deal with and reports to make, but when all was said and done, my little girl was safe. I've not gone Black Friday shopping since. In fact, for the last couple of years, my family has been having a Black Friday luncheon at our house with the man who saved my daughter and his family. Number 3. With the cat. There were several times when I spent time home by myself as a teenager. We lived in a nice big old house, but there were only 4 of us, my parents, my sister, and myself. My sister was younger, and went on more trips with my family than I did. When I was a teenager, I would often remain home. Riding in long trips in a car always made me feel sick to my stomach, so I chose to remain home. When I was 16, my parents and sister were going to be gone for a whole week for Thanksgiving at my grandma's house. We didn't get the whole week off, just Monday through Wednesday were school days, so I had to drive to school. We lived in a little bit of a rural area, but I had my own car that I could take to school. It was also an old beater car, but it got the job done pretty well. The first couple of days were completely normal. However, when I got home from school on Tuesday, I was surprised that the back door was unlocked. The last time I had opened it was to let the cat out, and I was really sure that I had locked it. But I was able to convince myself that I had just forgotten to lock it, and I didn't worry about it. On Wednesday, I again let the cat out before going to school. This time I made sure that the door was locked because of what had happened. I didn't think about it all day until I eventually got home again. I checked the door out of pure curiosity, on some level expecting it to be unlocked. However, it was locked, and I at first felt a little bit of relief. However, looking out onto the small back porch, I noticed that there was blood all over the porch. I instantly got freaked out, and I opened the door and looked around. It wasn't a ton of blood that was out there, but enough to make me concerned. I felt a breath of relief, though, when I didn't find anything out there that could have been bleeding. The cat had come back at that point, and she wasn't injured at all. I figured she had gotten into a fight with a small animal or a bird, and then injured it. She didn't have any blood on herself or on her paws, so I thought she had probably just cleaned herself afterwards. So nothing much happened that day that seemed weird or scary other than that. Finally, I had a day off of school, so I decided to sleep in on Thanksgiving, as long as I wanted to. I had my parents get me one of those huge Hungry Man turkey dinners, so I would get to have my own Thanksgiving meal. I figured I would be able to make that early, since we always had Thanksgiving dinners earlier in the day. While I had my food in the oven, the cat began asking to go outside again. She had been in all day as I slept in late. When I let her out this time, I discovered 2 really strange things. First, the door was unlocked again. I had to think about whether I had locked it the previous night when I let the cat in, and I could have sworn on my life that I had. Secondly, there was a little box laying on the porch. I opened the door and retrieved the box. It was just folded clothes, not taped, and when I opened it, I immediately dropped it on the ground. There was some kind of organ from some kind of animal in it. I couldn't tell what it was or what it was from, but it was both bloody and disgusting. I immediately went in the house and locked the door, I then checked all the other doors and the windows to make sure they were locked too. Everything was secure. Up until the box, everything could have been explained away by the actions of both me and the cat. But the thing in the box had to have been put there by a person, and that scared the hell out of me. If someone was that demented to do something like that, there's no telling what else he could do. After my dinner was done, I went to sit in the living room to watch TV while I ate. I don't recall what I was watching, but probably some holiday show. That's when I heard the sound of something moving. It was coming from upstairs. Having a cat, this wasn't unusual, but for some reason, it made me a lot more concerned on that day. I got up and checked around for the cat. Since I didn't see her on the bottom floor anywhere, I guess she was upstairs making a racket. However, to make myself feel a lot more secure, I decided to go up and check it out. I went upstairs, and that was when it occurred to me that I had let the cat outside. I was not used to being home during the day while she was out, which is why I thought she could have made all that noise. That thought made me very scared. I was nervous as I was checking around the upstairs, totally expecting to find a human or a wild animal in there. When I checked all the rooms and noticed that there was no one in there, I was about to go back downstairs. However, walking in the hallway, I noticed something that was off. We had one of those attics with a pool downstairs in them, and I noticed that the trapdoor was slightly pushed down. I slowly approached it, as I had to pass it to get downstairs anyway. I kept my eye on it, and at one point, I watched it as it moved down a little bit more. I noticed that there was a person up there, looking out at me, and he had blood on the hand that was pushing down the door. Terrified, I ran down the stairs, but as I did, I heard the trapdoor close rather than open anymore. So I didn't think the guy was following me. I went downstairs and called the police. I thought that I was fortunate that I was calling on Thanksgiving and not Halloween, or else I might not have been taken seriously. I grabbed a knife and remained in the house, but I kept watching the stairs in case the man would come out of the attic and come after me. This didn't happen. The police arrived, went into the attic, and got the man. Seeing him was scary, but it appeared that he was just a homeless guy who had severe mental illness. The police didn't think that he would have hurt me, and I guess that seemed accurate. I mean, the guy hadn't tried to hurt me at all, but he had to have been the person who left that box out there for me. It turns out he encountered my cat outside and followed it to the house. How the door got unlocked, I will never know. As far as that goes, all I could figure out is that I must have done it myself, and that's why the man was able to get in the house. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, I'd like to start by thanking my paid Patreon members, including my 2 VIPs, Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Hopper 8. I'd also like to thank Kelli Clark, Stinky News, EricaOdd, Tracy Sellars, Chronic J, and Heidi H. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving if you celebrate it. I had one too. I made this video a bit themed for Black Friday and Thanksgiving, but wasn't really feeling good enough to finish it last night, so I put it off until today. So I hope that's not too weird for anybody. If you were out shopping, I hope you stayed safe and didn't have anything scary or weird happen to you. And I hope all things are doing pretty good. The cats are, of course, not completely happy that they're not getting tons and tons of turkey for Thanksgiving, but they all say hi and hope everyone else is doing well too. So a happy belated Thanksgiving to everybody who celebrates it. Now I'd like to mention all of my free Patreon members, starting with Krystal Robin, Hicks, Lisa Herman, Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lend, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, and Evil Black Cat. And most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.